This program contains themes which viewers may find disturbing.
The Muslim Youth Helpline takes an average of 50 to 80 calls each week. The charity, now in its 10th year, says the majority of calls are from youth who have relationship problems. But 4 years ago, this problem was already identified. A report by a British think tank said Britain's Muslim youth felt let down in a number of ways by a society that misreads them. Young people felt disconnected, it said, from older generations, as well as pressure from a society that increasingly stereotypes them. Britain's largest Muslim organisation called the report brilliant. 3 years on, and on the 10th anniversary of the Muslim Youth Helpline, Avantgarde reports on the dilemma of Britain's Muslim youth. Why is the helpline still receiving a large number of calls from these so-called disconnected youngsters? If we've already studied the problems and championed the said report, has our progress been insufficient? And what are the main areas in which young British Muslims say they're most at odds with the parents who raised them?
Hello, Muslim Youth Helpline, how can I help?
It's a long way since Muslim Youth Helpline answered its first call.
How long has this been going on for? I see. And is this the first time that you're bringing this up with anyone?
Young Muslims call the helpline with all sorts of problems: domestic violence, bullying, stress, drug abuse. In its 10 years of service, the charity says it's taken some 30,000 calls. It claims all of these issues orbit around one central problem, and that is the difficulty youngsters face in relationships.
It's between parents and children, it's between young people and their friends, their relatives. It could be they're in a relationship and they're having problems in regards to that. It could be at school. So we have all sorts of issues.
So is this a new trend, or would you say this is an ongoing issue that's been occurring throughout your last 10 years?
I think that's always constantly been one of the top issues that people call us about. It is about relationships. And when we say young people, we kind of reach out to people from up to the age of 30, basically. And that's what we consistently get. We also get issues around mental health, whether they're suffering from loneliness, depression, but there are many issues that people are suffering from.
3 years ago, a British think tank studied this phenomenon. It found that many young Muslims felt disconnected from the traditional structures of their parents' generation, and that this was creating a new dilemma in the community. The Policy Research Centre said many of the problems stemmed from a language barrier between parents and children. And it said a generation gap exposed two very different cultures within one family, which often led young people to live double lives.
Up in the sky! Look! It's a plane! It's Superman!
4 years later, the Muslim Youth Helpline tells us young Muslims continue to live one life at home and the other outside, beyond the family and community ties.
This looks like a job for Superman.
Many of our childhood heroes lived double lives. Take Superman, for example. Both lives are good, and both lives fight the same evil. So in our adult lives, is a double life necessarily a bad thing? Aisha Aslam has been counselling families for 8 years. I asked her about young people living with this issue.
When it becomes dysfunctional is when people, when it starts to have an impact on them, or when they feel the need that they have to be a very different person. For example, with the youth, they're born in the Western culture, and with their parents or families, they've been born in a traditional Eastern culture. So their values, their expectations, their lifestyles are very different in terms of how the youth see it and how the parents see it. So this sometimes becomes a crisis for the youth, not knowing what is the best way forward in terms of how to live their lives. And what this means is basically that there's a confusion between what is cultural and what is Islamic.
The ones that end up in therapy can be considered the lucky ones. Others aren't able to manage as well. There have been a number of high-profile, tragic cases in which young girls and boys haven't been able to cope with an identity they don't feel comfortable with. We've collected testimony from a number of young people who say relationship issues and this feeling of being disconnected has resulted in some harrowing experiences. We've changed their names and used actors to hide their identities.
They were so pleased when I went to uni, and when I visited them during the holidays, I ended up somehow getting the nickname consultant. Medicine. I was studying medicine. Everyone else, the other first years, there's this drinking culture at university, and I guess it helps them deal with all the pressures of uni and living away. I didn't want to drink. I've never drank alcohol, no. But I did start taking recreational drugs. When you've had a long day, it's just a perfect way to relax. I didn't realise I was addicted until a long way down, when the head of my faculty called me in to review my work. And it turned out I was on some kind of slippery slope, just gradually going downwards like a cancer, just slowly taking over me. It got serious, and I was threatened with expulsion. So I quit first, but there's no way I was going to tell my parents. I lost my digs, and obviously couldn't find anything else to stimulate my mind. But I couldn't tell them. It would break them, and I just don't know how I'd even begin that conversation. So yes, it's a double life. It feels like one big lie, lots of millions of small lies, and I just don't know. I just don't even think I can tell them this.
Hiding a secret like that can create all sorts of complexities in someone's personality, and young people find release in all sorts of places. These days, many youngsters are turning to cyberspace for an alternative place to live an alternative life. For the purpose of this film, we created a fake social media profile. Within 2 hours, some 70 people who have never had any correspondence with our fake profile friended us. Experts say social media does more than just change the way people relate to one another and share information. Some 800 million people are registered with the social networking site Facebook, and one study shows that online friends can cause stress and reduce real human relationships to a neurotic limbo. It says young people are becoming mini-celebrities, seeking greater exposure, which ultimately equates to greater stress. Social media allows people to create entire false or artificial communities. People end up hoarding friends and living virtual lives online. But the internet has also become a medium which, for all its good communication and research facilities, can also be a place where the young and vulnerable can find alternative ways of release.
At first it was just a few names or awkward stares. It was as if they'd never seen a hijab. Maybe they hadn't, hey. Do you have hair under that thing, Or is Osama bin Laden your dad? It's never blatant. They say it quietly, again and again. Quietly in the classrooms, time and time again in the breaks. I knew I didn't like it, but it was hard to really tell anyone. My mum, she'd just say, "Oh, hey, you're a better person." I know, but it still hurt. I didn't just take a blade to my arm. It didn't happen out of nowhere. I've heard about it, seen it online. People do it, it helps them. It's my body. I always wore long sleeves and, my mum never comes in when I'm changing. We're not like that. Nobody knew, and I felt out of control until I did it. My teachers? No. You don't go to teachers about this stuff. It makes it worse. You can't do that. What if you can't prove it? Then nobody will believe you, and that's worse. Then they'll come after you even more, isn't it?
Rates of self-harm are on the increase. 1 in 5 young people will self-harm, and over 100,000 of them are admitted to hospital each year as a result. Self-harming can occur in a number of ways. 89% of the ones treated by the NHS last year were caused by self-poisoning, including drugs and alcohol. 7% were caused by sharp or blunt objects, and 3% by other means, including hanging, drowning, jumping, and firearms.
Self-harm is a consequence of many emotional issues. So it's not saying, oh, because somebody was bullied that they do that, or they were sexually abused, they do that. It's a form of release, and a lot of these young people turn to self-harm when they have no control over their lives, and this is a way of getting some control.
Self-harm is a very broad topic, and there's many reasons as to why people will self-harm. One could be to do with neglect, that they're being neglected in the house. It could also be a form of abuse that's taking place either on themselves or domestic violence situations that they're experiencing. It can also be expectations and pressures that they're having to carry in terms of cultural expectations and differences as to how they want to live their lives. So there's many differences in terms of where self-harm can take place. Certain traumas or issues that have taken place, and perhaps they've been told to sweep it under the carpet and leave it and not do anything about it for the sake of reputation, which is something that's also very common. All of these is emotional build-up, and as a result, there's only so much someone can take, and one of the aspects is self-harm. That's what can take place. And according to Islam, self-harm is not allowed, but neither is abuse, neither is neglect, neither are these emotional issues that take place for a youth. That is not allowed in Islam either. So it's about educating people about these issues and trying to understand that these certain things are not allowed.